Hello everybody. In today's video, we are going to be looking at MTG Arena's upcoming set, Jumpstart Historic Horizons, and I'm going to be giving you an in-depth breakdown of the mechanics of the set. That way, when you're looking at spoilers or reading a card in game, you understand what the words mean and what cards are going to be doing. So we're going to start by talking about the three exclusive to digital cards, or mechanics, that are in this set. So let's start with the first one being Seek. So there are going to be two examples of each mechanic. So let's read Manor Guardian. It's 2 and a black for a creature demon at 4/3. So 3 cost, 4/3. Pretty good. And when it dies, each player seeks a non-land card with mana value 2 or less. So that's one example of it. Another one is Faceless Agent. It's 3 mana, creature shapeshifter with changeling, meaning it's all types. It's a 2/1. And when it enters the battlefield, seek a creature card of the most prevalent creature type in your library. All right, so let's talk about Manor Guardian a little bit here. So Seek, how it works is that it's almost like Cascade, where Cascade, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you find something with lesser mana value, and then you cast that. Instead, with Seek, it's going to pull a random card that meets the criteria. So for Manor Guardian, the criteria is something with mana value 2 or less. That's not a land. So it's going to pull a random card from your library, and it's going to put it into your hand. Now, why is this digital only? Well, there's a couple things. First off, it does not shuffle, meaning that if you know what the top card of your library is and then you seek, it does not rearrange the cards in your library. That's impossible in paper because you can't find a card with that criteria without looking at your cards, which then means you need to shuffle. Another big thing is you don't have to reveal it. And here's what I'm talking about. So if we look at a traditional tutor, something like Grim Tutor, you'll notice it says search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. So with Seek, you're not shuffling. But if we go to a more specific tutor, like Idyllic Tutor, it says search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So kind of a big deal here is that when you tutor for something, first off, you're getting a very specific card. With Seeking, you don't get to choose the card. You're getting a random card that meets that criteria. So it's almost like Cascade in that way, but you don't have to reveal it, even if there is a criteria for it, such as being a creature card with the most prevalent type in your deck. And so what that means is you could end up, say you were playing Faceless Agent in a Goblin deck, and you pull a Muxus. Well, your opponent is going to play differently if they know you have Muxus in your hand compared to if you got, Goblin Charbelcher, which isn't, I don't even think in Historic right now. It's just an example of a Goblin. So you don't have to reveal it because it's digital only. The reason every single card that has you tutor for something with a specific criteria makes you reveal it is so that you can't cheat. Because if you didn't have to reveal it, you could theoretically go grab, some artifact when you're supposed to be grabbing a creature, and your opponent would have no way of knowing later in the game if you just drew that artifact or if it's the thing you got with the tutor. So that's to avoid cheating. But because we're in digital, it doesn't work like that. You can't just cheat like that. And so Seek doesn't let you choose, so it's random. It isn't able to be manipulated like to the top of your library, like an effect that would maybe do cards from the top of your library until it reveals something of the most prevalent creature type. If that was the case, you would it would be the top one and you could maybe manipulate your library. With this, you can't do that. It doesn't shuffle, like I said, and you don't have to reveal it to your opponent. So there are a bunch of reasons why this is digital only. Faceless Agent also kind of tells you a little bit that, they probably wouldn't say seek a creature card of the most prevalent creature type in your library. Why? Because your opponent would then get to know your entire deck list, which is a massive advantage. But MTG Arena can just assure that you're not cheating. Again, a lot of rules in Magic are to avoid cheating, and so these cards let you have more hidden info while being able to do cool effects. So comparing them to these tutors, they are less powerful because you don't get to choose exactly what you want, but have their advantages as well. The next mechanic is known as Perpetually. So essentially, it is an effect that does not go away at end of turn, but it actually just doesn't go away ever. And so Daviel's Withering is a great example of this. 1 black for an instant, target creature perpetually gets -1/-2. And what that means is that if you kill something with this, let's say it had 2 toughness, it now in the graveyard even has 2 less toughness. So if you have an effect that says, hey, return something from your graveyard to the battlefield, and you tried to return that thing with 0 toughness, it would return to the battlefield and immediately die because it still has that. Oh, you bounce it to your hand, still has 0 toughness. Oh, it goes into your library, still has 0 toughness when it gets drawn. Oh, it goes to the command zone. Oh, it still has 0 toughness. That's why it was banned in Historic Brawl, because otherwise this card would be utterly insane. So it's an effect that doesn't go away. That card, it is stuck with that card forever. Flickering it, doing any of that will not get rid of it. And because of that, it can do some really interesting things. So Long Tusk Stalker, 1 green for a 1/1 creature cat. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy counter. Then you can pay 2 energy counter, and it perpetually gets +1/+0. So essentially, it's going to get it basically gets a counter on it. And if it dies and comes back, it keeps that boost. But then you can also choose a creature card in your hand. If you do, that creature gets +1/+0. So again, you can now give things perpetual effects in the graveyard, in your library, in your hand. And because we're digital, we don't actually have to reveal that creature card. Again, if this was paper, you'd be forced to say, hey, here's the creature that I had in my hand that I'm giving this boost to. Because otherwise you could just later on cheat and say, yeah, I gave this thing a boost, even though you really didn't. So again, digital is letting us have a little bit more hidden information, which often leads to more fun games. Now, this video is not going to be discussing the merits of these digital only cards. I'll talk about that a little bit more in spoilers and my review of the set and all of that. But this video is simply to explain the mechanics. So again, it can, if I have this in my hand, I end up discarding the card that got buffed in the graveyard. It still has that power boost, which does mean if you have a card that says return something with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, if you boosted something up to 3 power, it can't be targeted. So it does have some impact in the graveyard. It's not like it just remembers everything. So it is very, very cool. This one is the most, the one that could happen the most in paper, I think. And I think the next one could also happen in paper, but this one gets really complicated because, say you Daviel's Wither something and then put it into their library, you have to mark which card was withered in case they draw another copy of it that wasn't the withered one. You would have to, physically, put paper in a card sleeve to mark which one you, boosted up with Long Tusk Stalker. So these ones theoretically could be added. They would just be very, very complicated and require a lot of memory. Next, we have Conjur. So this is essentially kind of taking a card that's not in your sideboard, not in your library, and just putting it into a zone. It can either be in your graveyard, in your hand, and, on the battlefield. So let's take a look at Boneyard Aberration. It's a 5-cost 3/3 skeleton dog. When it dies, exile it. If you do, conjure 3 reassembling skeleton cards into your graveyard. So essentially, you take the card reassembling skeleton, and you put it in your graveyard. Now, this doesn't seem all that different than something like Garth from Modern Horizons 2, which lets you kind of cast a token copy of one of the following spells. But what's really different here is that it's not just casting it, it is putting it somewhere. And it's not a token. So those 3 tokens can't be in the graveyard. So these are 3 cards that could have been in your library, can be put it back into your hand, back into your library, exiled, flickered, all of that. They are not tokens, and that is the really big deal about these, is that they are not a token representation. They are just cards in the game. They can get bounced back to your hand, and they are not gone. So that means, they can do things where they conjure stuff into the graveyard, or conjure stuff randomly into your library, or conjure stuff, onto the stack is a little bit more doable in paper, but you can conjure stuff into your hand. And so what this does is it gives you 3 basically reassembling skeletons that are there forever. They can die, come back, and they are not treated as tokens. So for instance, Shoreline Scout, 1 blue, creature, Merfolk Scout, 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you may exile a Merfolk card or land card from your hand. If you do, conjure a Tropical Island card into your hand. So again, this is just going into your hand, and it counts as a normal land. It is not a token. And then it says, as long as another Merfolk or island entered the battlefield under your control this turn, it gets +1/+0. So actually a really awesome card in Merfolk decks to help with your fixing, but you can see it is a little different than Garth, where you are casting token copies or creating a copy of it on the stack, but all of the time they're not real spells. That spell can't be bounced back to your hand. If you play that Black Lotus and it gets bounced back to your hand, you don't actually get a Black Lotus in your hand, whereas Conjur you do. Now, those are the main mechanics of the set. However, there are a couple card-specific mechanics. So let's talk about Daviel. So we're not going to talk about his other abilities, other than his -2 that says, accept one of Daviel's offers, then accept one of Daviel's conditions. So they said one of the cool things they could do when designing these cards was make cards that, the text wouldn't fit on paper. And so this is an example of that. So essentially, you will get 3 of the, at the top, 3 of these will be an option whenever you -2, and it'll be random. So you can either draw 3 cards, conjure a Manor Guardian card into your hand, return 2 random creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. They perpetually gain +1/+1. Return a random creature card with the highest mana value from among cards in your graveyard to the battlefield. You get an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+0. You get an emblem with spells you cast cost black less to cast. You get an emblem with Daviel planeswalkers you control have +2 draw card. You get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. So basically, you're going to be presented with 3 of these and you choose one. Then it has a condition, so then you have to pay a cost, essentially. So you can lose 6 life, exile 2 cards from your hand. If fewer than 2 cards were exiled this way, each opponent draws cards equal to the difference. Sacrifice 2 permanents, which could be Daviel. Each creature you control perpetually gains +1/+1. You get an emblem with creatures you control get -1/-0, or -0. Creatures, spells you cast cost black more to cast. Emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library. And you get an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each creature you control. So essentially, you get something good, something bad. It's possible you get 3 of those emblems and have to choose one. It's possible you choose creatures you control get +2/+0 and creatures you control get -1/-0, and then essentially you just gave all your creatures +1/+0. So it's, going to be different every time you use it. It's very luck based, but it also is very powerful sometimes. It can also be very weak sometimes, so it's really different. The big thing here is that this would not fit on a card, but on MTG Arena it'll be nicely displayed, and that's something a little bit interesting. Another card is Tome of the Infinite. It is 3 cost blue legendary artifact. Pay blue, tap, conjure a random card from Tome of the Infinite spellbook into your hand. It perpetually gains. You may spend mana as though we're mana of any color to cast a spell. So essentially, you will randomly get, or you will not randomly. You will randomly get one of these 10 cards. Now, I actually think this card is really, really good. Now, it is random, but think about it. All of these cards are 1 mana. So that means for 2 mana, you do an effect like this at random. But you don't have to do it then. If you had to do it then, this card would be just meh. Because, you might get fog and you didn't need that. But you put it into your hand, and it doesn't show your opponent. So you could pay 1 mana to essentially draw one of these cards. And honestly, I would be fine paying 2 mana to exile a creature, or ponder. Force Spike is a little So Light of Hope, Force Spike, and Assault Strobe, I guess, are the 3 kind of just meh ones. But okay, I would pay 2 mana to get 3 mana. I think most people would. I would pay 2 mana to do a duress. Remember, this is 2 mana and you're not spending a card after the first one. Obviously you spent a card for Tome of the Infinite, but after that you are kind of just profiting. And I feel yes, it's not dependable. You can't say, oh, I need, a removal spell from this. But if you just activate this every turn, that's 1 mana, draw a card. And that seems really, really good to me. Maybe I'm misjudging this card, but I feel especially in something like Historic Brawl, this is going to be a blast, which Historic Brawl is coming out with Historic Horizons. So I think this is going to be a really, really fun card. Now, I did say I was talking about the mechanics of the set, but I'm not actually talking about all of them, because this includes a ton of cards from Modern Horizons and things from the past, which use a ton of mechanics. Just here, we see Proliferate, Convoke, Unearth. I'm not going to be talking about all of those, but in-game, whenever you hover over a card, it should explain the mechanic if you have any questions about it. I just wanted to bring that up. There are going to be lots of other mechanics in the set. I'm just talking about the new ones here today. That is going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed and found it useful, please hit that like button. If you want to see more content like this and more news about Historic Horizons and all of that, hit the subscribe button. You can check out my other socials in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.